Hey, hi everyone. How are you all? Hope you all are healthy, happy, safe, and fine at your home. Enjoying the vacations? Yeah? No, but working out on your completions of the classworks, worksheets, class tests, everything, right? That's like good students, obedient children. Today, we are going to deal with yet another topic, tiger in the zoo, from our English textbook for class 10th, The First Flight, CBSE, of course. I, Priya teacher, I'm going to take you through this sweet journey, visit to the zoo. The name of the poetry is A Tiger in the Zoo. So, let's begin with the journey through our Sarhad school. The name of the poetry is A Tiger in the Zoo for class 10 CBSE book First Flight, poem number 3. These small little cubs are inside the zoo and all together, the lion cub and the tiger cub together. How cute. Moving on, let's first have a little information about the poet. The poet's name is George Leslie Norris. I would advise you to use the correct spellings of the author's name or the poet's name. If you're not so sure, just mention it as L. Norris. Birth year 1921, and we lost this personality on 2006, in the year 2006. He was a prize-winning Welsh poet and short story writer by profession. He is considered as the most important Welsh writers of the post-war period, the era after the war, and his literary works, that is written literatures, have won many prizes. His famous works are, the names of his literatures or his works are, one is Finding Gold, The Loud Winder, The Phoenix, Living Poets series, it's a series, Ransoms, and etc. Try to gather any of these and try to go through it. Just a sound introduction for the poem would be A Tiger in the Zoo poem introduction. The poem, written by Leslie Norris, explains the agony and helplessness of a caged tiger that lives in a zoo. The poet explains what his life could be, the tiger's life could have been if he had been a free animal. The poet has tried to explain about the condition of animals that are caged by human beings for their own fun. Have you practically visited a zoo or a jungle practically? See, when in an open safari you visit to watch out for the wild animals, the situation there is you have to travel in a closed van. Yes, you are caged up and the animals are set free into their habitat. But when you cage these furious or wild animals for your fun into bondages, at that point of time you are free, but they lose on their freedom. So that concept or that aspect of our implementations or our actions and the animals, the animals have got to go through it, that agony, that sad part of the activity is explained, and the helplessness of these animals is expressed in this poetry. In short, if we are trying to cover up the summary of the poem, let's read it off together. I'll run in the mouse click. Yeah, the poem begins with a description of a tiger that is very beautiful. Can you think of these adjectives for a tiger? For that you need to have a poetic view as well. The tiger does look beautiful at times, only in pictures. Practically I would be rather scared of it. And he is walking in his little cage. He has beautiful stripes on his skin. What sort of stripes? Black, yellow or brown, and has velvet soft paws. But the tiger is not happy and is quite angry about being confined, caged up or locked up. The poet says that if the tiger was not confined to the zoo cage, He would have been hiding himself behind the long grass near some water body. In order to catch its prey, that is the deer, it would have been a fleshy deer. Also, he would have terrorized the residents of the village around the forest area. But the reality is totally opposite to this. He was confined in a cage which was made up of strong building material. So, strong building material could be just the concrete material, or it would be metal rods which even the tiger cannot deal with, cannot fix himself out, and he was helpless there. He could not show his power to the visitors now. He was like a toy, he was a fun game for the visitors. Now he could not show his powers, which was his inherent skill or inherent character rather of the tiger. Therefore, never tried to terrorize them. So he was not even bothered of them, whether they came in or they went off. The tiger is described as being powerless and agonized in sadness, unhappy, by the poet. He says that during night also he is alone, hearing the voice of the patrolling vehicles of police, vigilance, keeping a watch on supervising vehicles of the police, and looking at the stars. The cage life has totally changed the tiger's personality. Is a tiger actually supposed to be caged and locked inside? For example, if I am a very free, frank, bold personality and I am being asked to stay into bondages, restricted to do the things that I feel at my heart to be done by me. So that's not really me, it's not the tiger there. The poet is trying to say that the animal which is famous for its furious character is not there. That's what the main. Now the big concept here actually writing in the poetry is, why exactly do we need to write poetries? Why not only the prose section? Because that enhances the writing skill and the understanding skill of a listener and writing skill of the writer. It shows up your command on the language, your confidence to deal in the language, play with the words, the structures and all. So that's the reason you have got to know more about the poetry. How exactly? So I have called it as a big concept when it comes to poetries. Let's talk about the rhyming scheme. The rhyming scheme is ABCB. Cage and rage, we've discussed it. Personification. The tiger is personified as a person here. He never refers to the tiger. The poet never refers to the tiger or addresses to the tiger as it, as we usually do for things and animals. We never term them or address them as he or she. We address them as it, but the poet here takes all his leisure of writing and he addresses him as he and not as it. Metaphor. Metaphor, we discuss that. Metaphor is when you do not use as or like, but you directly compare them to the other thing, the similar thing that you want to address it to. So the tiger's paws are compared with velvet pads of velvet, that is pads of velvet. He doesn't say that his paws are like velvet or his paws are as soft as velvet. He directly says that pads of velvet. So there he is using the poetic device or the literary device metaphor. If he would have used as or like, it would have been the poetic device simile and not metaphor. Enjambment, we've discussed that the word itself indicates or suggests something. Enjambment. A complete sentence is mentioned in 2-3 lines by cutting it or parting it out into 2-3 lines without the indication or use of any punctuation marks. The sentence is continuing to next line without any punctuation mark. That is what is called as use of enjambment in a poetry. Imagery, the first line itself, when you begin up with the poetry after reading the title, the poet has very impressively expressed the first line of the poetry. He stalks in his vivid stripes. Immediately you can imagine of a tiger caged inside, standing behind the bars and all. So that's what image is created in the minds of the reader. poet tries to create an image about the tiger. He stalks in his vivid stripes, the few steps of his cage. All you can imagine, not just the picture but the whole video sort of thing, when the tiger is practically walking in his limited, yes, boundaries, cage. Consonants, as we've discussed, consonants is all about repetition of a consonant sound once or twice in the same line. Use of S is repeated, stalks, his and stripes. We will read the poetry along with the proper stress and the rhythm, so that you understand and enjoy the fun of the language. Don't just take it as a foreign language, but I know that it is not our native language, but if you start enjoying the language, have fun speaking, listening to it, English is really fun and interesting. Yeah. Assonance is something like consonants, but assonance talks about vowel sounds, whereas consonants talks about consonant sounds. How many vowels are there? 5. Consonants 21. So when there is this profound repetition of a vowel sound, we call it as assonance poetic device used in the poetry. So use of the vowel sound I in his vivid stripes. Just check the first line itself. In his vivid, I is profoundly used and stressed upon. If you sing the poetry, which we will do, we'll say along. Then we've got oxymoron, use of adjectives, opposite meaning words to indicate a similar idea. Like quiet and rage means he is angry but is not showing it off. In anger he has gone down quiet altogether. So that is what is called as the poetic device oxymoron. Now let's sing along with the poetry para by para, one stanza at a time. We will sing along. Open up your textbooks. I hope you must have by now, and run around the words that we are going to sing and rhyme together. Put in your index finger below the words that we are reading right now, so that your brain remembers the sequence of the words as well as it is, and you will be easily able to reproduce the poetry lines in your answers in the board exams. Let's go together. The name of the poetry is A Tiger in the Zoo. It's not the tiger or just the tiger in the zoo. It is A Tiger in the Zoo. Then he stalks in his vivid stripes. Say with me. He stalks in his vivid stripes. The few steps of his cage. The few steps of his cage. On pads of velvet quiet. On pads of velvet quiet. In his quiet rage. In his quiet rage. Well, some hard words are given over here, or new words which you would need to take a note of. Stalks means to follow. He keeps on walking, so follow. Vivid is bright and brilliant color, bright colored stripes. Pads is his paws. The paws of the tiger are soft, although it has got fine nails, sharp nails there. Then rage is actually anger. So that's the reason we called it an oxymoron, quiet rage. Here the poet says that the tiger that is confined into the zoo moves around in the cage under his bright colored skin. He further says that the tiger can take only a few steps because the tiger is small and it is not easy to move inside the cage. One cannot hear his footsteps because he has very soft feet. Mother Nature has made it all for each and every animal accordingly. Have you ever thought if we would have had eyes at the back of your head? Why do we have eyes on your face and all? So the Mother Nature has intentionally created everything the way we would require to have, which would help us out for our daily activities, for our survival. Like velvet paws of which there is no sound of the tiger's footsteps. The tiger tries to control his anger by quietly walking into limited area of his cage. He is angry because he is not free. Of course, we have very recently experienced all. Hi there. Today we are going to deal with yet another topic from class 10th CBSE English, the first flight book. The name of the poetry number 3, is A Tiger in the Zoo. The poet is Leslie Norris. He's written this poetry to mention about two things. One is the physical animal, tiger, and the other is we, our thoughts and our mind. How do we build up bondages? By thinking for ourselves. Two aspects for one poetry. Let's first read the poetry stanza wise. Let's deal with the first stanza. The first stanza stands this way. In the first stanza, the poet discusses about the real or the practical tiger being confined into the cage, and in the second stanza, he talks about what exactly would have happened if the tiger was set free, not put into the bondages. What would have he enjoyed? So let's start with it. The first stanza, you can recite after me. He stalks in his vivid stripes, the few steps of his cage, on pads of velvet quiet, in his reach. Let's cover up this first stanza. First of all, when he says he's talking about the tiger. He stalks in his, stalks doesn't mean stand, it means his stalks means he is just standing steadily, hiding himself in his vivid stripes. Stripes, a tiger has stripes of yellow, black or brown on his body. That is what the poet is referring to by stripes. Vivid is brilliant or bright colors, shiny, glowy colors. Vivid stripes. The few steps of his cage, because he is bonded right now, confined into a cage. So he is having a few steps to walk. It's not like a jungle. He is no more free. He is bonded inside. So the few steps of his cage. On pads of velvet quiet. See how beautifully the same line has been mentioned. If you read the first para, you can practically visualize the whole scene. The tiger inside a cage, walking very quietly but with anger and rage on the velvet green grass that is grown inside the confined cage walls. On pads, on pads of his velvet quiet, means pads of his means his paws, the paws that a tiger has, paws of a tiger. And quiet is he is seemingly quiet, but he is angry inside. He is not happy to be bonded inside. We have felt this very recently, experienced it very recently. So on pads of velvet quiet, in his rage. Rage is anger. In his quiet anger. Next, this was what when the tiger was inside the zoo. Let's check the other side of the same picture. If the tiger would not have confined himself into the bondages. Now the other perspective of the poetry. Like we keep ourselves bonded into our own thoughts, our own perspectives, our own judgments. Let's think of the same poetry in the second perspective as well. In the second para, the poet is talking all about when the tiger is set free, if he would have been free. He should be lurking in shadows. Lurking is hiding. Let's read it together. He should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass, near the water hole. Water hole is water body. Near the water hole where plump deer pass. Nothing much to explain over here. You can practically and easily understand what exactly is the poet trying to say over here. He should be lurking in shadow. Lurking is when he is in the king of the jungle. If he is in the open jungle there and he is trying to catch hold of his prey, attack on his prey, he should be lurking, hiding inside the grass where near the water body, where he is awaiting a fleshy deer to come in to kill his thirst, so that he can attack upon the deer and have his prey. So he should, let's repeat the whole poetry once again. He tucks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage, on pads of velvet quiet, in his rage, in his anger, quietness. Does a tiger make noise when he walks or runs? No, he doesn't. He does it very cautiously. He should be lurking in shadow of the long grass, sliding through long grass, near the water body rather, where plump deer pass. Plum is fleshy deer passes because he wants his flesh as a prey. Now let's discuss a little upon the literary devices that have been used over here. The first literary device is let's talk about the rhyme scheme that is used over here. What rhyme scheme do you see in the first paragraph? The same is followed everywhere. See, if the first para ends with S, let's call it as A. If the second line ends with E, let's call it as B. Cage. You don't pronounce the E over there. It's just cage. So let's take this G, the sound of J, as B. Now in the third line, the line ends with T. So there is no link between S and G and T. So let's call this as C. A, B, C. Again, your fourth line ends with G. So we can call this G, the J sound of J, again as B. So what counts to be your rhyming scheme? The rhyming scheme used in this first para at least is A, B, C, B. That's the rhyming scheme for the first para. Now let's talk about the personification. The literary device personification, poetic device that is personification. The tiger is always addressed as he by the poet. Whereas generally, syntactically, what do we address a tiger or an animal is addressed as it. We don't call it as he or she. But the poet here takes the leisure of personifying, and every time he addresses the tiger as he. So that becomes the personification. Then it's all about metaphor. Where do you find metaphor over here? When he says pads of velvet, he doesn't call it as if his paws are like velvet. No, he directly says that his pads are pads of velvet. His paws are pads of velvet. He doesn't even pronounce the word paws over here. So that makes it metaphor. If you have the word like or as over here, it becomes the poetic device simile. But here it is metaphor. Next, it's consonants. Where do you see consonants? The poetic device consonants itself explains that there is a sort of repetition of a consonant sound. In the first line itself, if you see, stocks in his vivid stripes. While you try to go on with the flow of the poetry, the sound of S is repeated 3 times literally with proper amount of stress on the lines. If you check, sound of S, stocks, his, and then vivid stripes. So here in the first line, he has used the literary device consonants. Then oxymoron. Where has he used oxymoron? When he talks in the third and the fourth line about quiet and rage. Rage is anger. We've already discussed, and quiet means silence. So these are two opposite adjectives rather, which are used to convey a same posture of an animal, or here a personified tiger rather. So here in the fourth and the third line, he has used the literary device oxymoron. Now let's talk about enjambment. He also uses enjambment literary device, this literary device, enjambment. Wherein enjambment means what? What did I tell you? Enjambment means one sentence is split up into 2-3 lines without using any grammatical punctuations or syntaxes. Like we've got comma, semicolon and full stop over here, but you don't have any such indications in the second para unless you have the last full stop after the deer pass. So these 3 lines indicate the use of poetic device enjambment. There's also assonance used over here in the first line itself. first line itself, where you have assonance. When we talk about consonants, it's all about a consonant sound stressed up in the single line. But when we talk about assonance, it's about a and yes, vowel sound repeated once or twice. So what is happening over here? In his vivid stripe, see, I is repeated twice or thrice over here. Not just the alphabet I, but I mean to say the sound of I. When you try to go along with the rhythm of the poem, you have to give a little stress or repeat the word I there. Vivid, his, right? And then it's also imagery. Why imagery? What's imagine? What do you mean by imagine or create an image? See, in the first line itself, see, he stalks in his vivid stripe. The poetry, a tiger in the zoo is talking about a tiger is all that you know before you read the poetry. But once you start having a hold of it, getting a hook of it, the first line itself tries to create I won't say tries, creates a proper picture of a tiger inside a zoo directly. He stalks in his vivid stripes. An image is tried to be created immediately in the first line itself. So that makes the use of imagery in the first line itself. So in the first line, you've got the use of consonants, you've got the use of assonance, you've got the use of imagery. Then you've got oxymoron, when you use two different opposite adjectives in the same line to convey a similar idea with two different objectives. Quite and range, opposite adjectives. Then you've got metaphor, where one thing is compared to the other thing without the use of as or like. If you use as or like, it becomes simile. But if you avoid using as or like and very technically make it very creatively, form lines like this, pads of velvet, that becomes metaphor. Personification, all through the poem, the poet has personified the animal and he hasn't ever indicated him as it. And enjambment, what did we talk about enjambment? In enjambment, one sentence is split up into 2-3 lines without the use of any punctuation mark. Next, let's read it together. He should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass, near the water hole, where plum deer pass. Plum is healthy fleshy deer for the prey to feed his hunger. Lurking is to be hidden, as to wait for you, wait for the deer, yeah, wait for your prey rather. Then the poet says that if this tiger was free, which tiger? I told you there are two perspectives for this poetry. One, the real tiger, the real animal on which we very harshly do injustice. We don't have actually any right to confine another life into cages for our own fun. For my own enjoyment, I cannot confine or put someone behind the bars. But we do that, and we buy the tickets and go to watch them. Even the circus, animal circus, which is right now banned, no more a question. He would have hid himself, checked for the spelling of hid, himself behind the long grass near the water bodies, so that he could easily catch a deer in order to have it as its food. See, basically the poet wants to say that the actual life of a tiger is to live in the jungle. The mother nature has created a whole cycle. The tiger has got to kill his prey, the prey has got to eat the grass has got to grow. Yes, ants, pigeons, everyone has got its own role in this whole environment. So we should not disturb, which human being has done to a far off extent to achieve all his desires. Where he could catch his prey and eat it, but the tiger in the cage cannot do so. He's got ready-made food for which he is not meant. He is not meant for ready to eat food and all. Yeah, he's supposed to catch his prey, and he is capable enough, which you should also do. No, never ask for help unnecessarily. Try to do things on your own as far as possible. that makes you enhance your own personality, develop yourself. Next, he should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, by the edge or the brim where the jungle ends. There should be a village. The villagers are living at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. How does a tiger catch hold of his prey? He first catch holds of the respiratory tract of his prey, kills him by stopping his breathing process, respiration, and once that stops, the heart is stopped forever, and then his prey is ready for his dinner or his meal. So that terrorizes the villagers living around on the outskirts of it. He should be snarling around houses. Snarling is warning sounds. It's not roaring actually. A particular type of sound is made by animal, which we can call it as gurrana and all. Yeah, he keeps on snarling just to make aware the others of his presence in and around. You can feel the presence there. I haven't personally experienced it, I won't like to as well. I hope you too shouldn't. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws. Baring is baring, barefooted and all. Baring is uncovered, exposed. Fangs is sharp tooth of animals. The poet says that if the tiger would have been free, he would have snarled around the houses located at the outskirts of the forest. He would terrorize people with his sharp tooth and claws. This would create fear among the people living in the village near the forest on the outskirts. Now, the literary devices, most of the literary devices we've already discussed of, used in the poetry. The only unique or the different one that is used over here is onomatopoeia. The spelling, the pronunciation itself is quite a little funny and to remember easily. Onomatopoeia. Now, the figure of speech or the literary device or the poetic device is very easy to remember. Use of any word which denotes any sort of sound. So, snarling means it indicates the sound created by the animal. So, snarling, use of that word in a poetic line itself suggests you that poetic device onomatopoeia is used. Yes, that's the only difference that we have got in this stanza over here. Otherwise, all the other literary devices, the poetic devices are same. Yeah. Now, let's begin on with the third and the fourth paragraph stanza of the poem A Tiger in the Zoo. Let's recite the third paragraph stanza first. Start with me. See, he should be snarling around houses. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing his village. Again, he should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing his village. Right. Now, what we have done is in the first paragraph stanza, we've seen that it was talking all about when the tiger was confined into the walls of his cage. In the second paragraph, the tiger was free, if he would have been free. And in the third paragraph, again the same thing continues. If he would have been free, what he would have done. See, he should be snarling around the houses at the edge of the outskirts of the forest. The tiger would have been snarling, means not roaring actually, but making a sound to make the others aware of his presence, which the tiger makes. Snarling means a type of sound that the animal makes to make others aware of his presence. Snarling around the houses at the jungle's edge of the jungle, on the outskirts, a nearby village. Baring his white fangs. Fangs means teeth, tiger's teeth, and baring is like barefooted, opening up, exposing his teeth. Baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing his village. See, he also terms it as his village because he's got a control and a hold of the whole villagers because of scaring them away, terrorizing them of his sound. We just can just think of a tiger, but can you stand with a tiger and pick up a snap picture, live tiger? Makes difference. Next paragraph, next stanza. But he is locked in a concrete cell. Now again the reality. But he is right now locked into a concrete cell. Cell is the prison, his compartment, his apartment to stay. But he is locked in a concrete cell. His strength behind the bars. So all his strength are compounded behind the bars. Stocking the length of his cage. Stock word was there in the first line of this poetry. Stock means to follow. Stocking the length of his cage, just trying to measure the length of his cage. That's what he could do right now, because he's all confined into the boundaries of the cage, concrete wall. Ignoring the visitors. It's not about the visitors, because he is not happy being inside the four walls. Now, if you look at these paragraphs or stanzas in the second perspective, the first perspective was about the real tiger that we are talking about. And the second one I told you of our thoughts, the way we bound ourselves. He should be thinking that way about me, or he should be thinking that way about me. We don't need to think about others, right? That's their perspective or their judgment. What I think of myself is more important. How do I confine myself by thinking about others? That are the type of bondages that I put on myself, or restriction that I imply on myself. So that's the second perspective, the same poetry. And the figures of speech or the poetic devices that have been used in these paragraphs is a new one other than consonants, assonance, personification, and the next one is Onomatopoeia. Means what? It's just the use of any word which indicates a sound, because the word itself, this figure of speech or this poetic device or literary device itself is has a variant number of consonants are used. Onomatopoeia. Yeah, so the word snarling itself indicates the use of this literary device, onomatopoeia. That's the additional one, except the others that we have already discussed. Now, but he is locked in a concrete cell. His strength behind bars, stocking the length of his cage, ignoring the visitors. Actually, he is not any which ways bothered or interested into the visitors. He is interested into the prey for his food, and now being behind the bars, he is not even able to catch hold of his prey and enjoy something. You know what? If you get to do something ready-made, you don't get that fun of success, yes, and doing it on your own. But if you have got to struggle initially, you find it quite difficult to deal with things, but once you work them out successfully, the fun and the joy or the happiness that you feel is like worth it. You cannot explain it in words, that sort of a thing. So right now the tiger is not able to feel the joy of success because he is getting the ready-made food. He is only capable of terrorizing others using his paws and his teeth, which he is not able to use right now. So let's see, the meaning of the word concrete here actually means buildings made up of brick or cement, sand and water. Of course, you know that. Now the poet comes to the reality of the tiger, that is inside the cage. He says that the tiger is confined in a strong cell which is made up of strong building materials. He further says that as the tiger is behind the bars, so his ferociousness, that's what I told you. We block ourselves, our own capacities, our own potentials through our own thoughts. What would they say? What would the society think of it then? If I am confined, if I am convinced that I am not going to hurt someone, I am not going to get someone into trouble, and I am doing something for the benefit of the others, I should not be scared of doing something. Yes, I should do if my intentions are clean, clear and right. ethically, morally, then that's your inner potential. That is what is you. So tiger's inherent character feature was ferociousness. Is not it's not of any use right now because he is behind the bars. Ferociousness is also behind the bars. Yes, so he just stalks in the cage, just follows from this edge to that edge, this corner to that corner. He never tries to terrorize the visitors because his power is restricted by the cage. We ourselves, if I keep on thinking about others and I stop working on myself, I block my own growth. Yes, so that's what could happen if you cage in yourself, block in yourselves with negativity or bad thoughts, thinking a lot, too much of thinking. Yes, therefore he never tries to terrorize the visitors as he cannot attack them. Visitors can be think of visitors for us, negative thoughts, unwanted thoughts, unnecessary thinking about something. These are visitors. Just avoid them. Don't look at them. Ignore them. Yeah. Moving on. Next, he hears the last voice at night. Now, he hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. Now, in the first para, he was inside the cage. The second para, the tiger is expressed to be out of the cage. What would have been the picture? And continued in the third para as well. Fourth para, again the reality is discussed. But right now that's not the case, that the tiger is not outside, he is confined. And again back, how does he end up? How does he work on himself? How does he manage himself, the tiger, an animal? He hears the last voice at night. Just one day is described over here. He hears the last voice at night to patrolling cars. Patrolling, we discussed supervising cars of the police, and stares with his brilliant eyes. Brilliant is like sparkling, bright, shiny eyes, big eyes. Yeah, brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. See, he's sharp, smart, fast. That's what is brilliance indicated in over here. Brilliant, and he's trying to divert his attention, trying to manage himself through focusing on the brilliant star shining up in the sky. Patrolling is to guard or to vigil. The poet says that in the night the tiger hears the sounds of the patrolling cars. Patrolling cars are the vehicles of police which are used to guard at night. So, in the night the tiger hears the sounds of these cars. He then stares at the shining stars with his shining eyes. The poet wants to say that the tiger is sad. Of course, anyone would be sad because it's not his wish. He doesn't want to be himself to be confined, locked inside four walls of the cage, and he is confined in the cage. So he cannot do anything now. He has lost his total freedom for the whole life. Therefore, he stares at the stars in the night and tries to divert his thoughts towards them. And that's how he ends his day, a tiger. Try to relate that to us. The literary device, most of them are the same. It's one, the rhyming scheme, then the enjambment is used, and then the alliteration. Use of the sound H in the starting of two words. The he hears, consecutive use of the word begins with those vowels. Yes, this is the difference between consonants and alliteration. Consonants is, it doesn't have to be in consequence, consecutive words. Yes, the sound of a consonant will be repeated in the poetry line, same line, but not necessarily consecutive words. Here in alliteration, what actually happens is consecutively he hears one after the other, only one the repetition, then it is alliteration. Assonance, as we've discussed, the sound of a vowel will be repeated in the now the last para of the poem, The Tiger in the Zoo, the last paragraph. See, in the first paragraph, the tiger was inside the zoo, confined into the four walls. In the second para, the poet has imagined the life of the tiger if it would have been beyond the bondages, out of the cage and in the open jungle. Same thing continues in the third paragraph, and then in the fourth paragraph the tiger is back into the zoo, the reality, the practical confinement inside the zoo, concrete walls around him. And the last para is now this is the fact, this is the reality. How does the tiger deal with it? What solution does he has to suffice himself, to divert his mind, to control himself? Let's see. Let's first recite the last lines. He hears the last voice at night. He hears the last voice at night. The patrolling cars. He hears the last voice at night. The patrolling cars. And stares with his brilliant eyes, and stares with his brilliant sparkling eyes at the brilliant stars. Even the stars are sparkling and they look brilliant. Brilliant stars. He hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. Ultimately, what has he got? He's got to find a solution for himself out altogether being confined into the four walls of the zoo. What does a tiger do trying? He hears the last voice by the night. Last voice of what? Patrolling cars. Patrolling is like keeping a watch over something, having a look over a vigilance. That's what patrolling cars. The police cars patrol in the night to have a look around, to check, supervise. So the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes, keeps on staring towards the open sky, and is trying to divert his mind towards the stars and satisfy himself, calm down, somehow be happy there at the brilliant stars. Now let's discuss the perspective of the poetry that we are done. The other perspective was about our thoughts. When we think about the others' thoughts, what exactly the others must be thinking about me, we can find ourselves into bondages. If we stop doing that, if we have our own confidence and thought power that this is my potential, I could do this. If we take ourselves out of, expand our limitations, there is immense world to explore, vast and wide knowledge and fields to explore ourselves out. If you expose yourselves to variety of skills, talents, you too have got immense potentials. We don't need to put the bondages, or just because of peer pressure, just follow a particular thing because the others are doing and we've got to do it. No, these are the bondages put in by me, myself, on myself. So we can be a real tiger in the zoo, not the real tiger in the zoo. Which zoo? Not the man-made zoo. And we actually do not have any right to control these animals. The mother nature has created these animals. We don't have any right to control their lives. They have complete right to have their freedom. So we ourselves can be the real tiger in our own zoo, not the other zoo made up of the thoughts of other people or other people's judgments, the society's judgments. So you can be yourselves at all times. So that's the real tiger in the tiger inside the zoo. Thank you. Next we've got the textual question answers. If you check on your page number 30, thinking about the poem and all, read the poem again and work in pairs or groups to do the following task. Find the words that describe the movements and actions of the tiger in the cage and in the wild. Arrange them in 2 columns. Do that on your own. Well, if you have ready, pick up a snap here. You've got it ready. Find the words that describe the 2 places and arrange them in 2 columns. Then now try to share ideas about how the poet uses words and images to contrast the 2 situations. See, this is what I meant by writing poetry and playing with the language. May not be our native language, but it's a language that we are learning from a long time, many years. So just pick up a snapshot which would help you to understand how exactly should you pen out the answer. Next, notice the use of a word repeated in lines such as these. On pads of a velvet quiet in his quiet rage. See, quiet. Then, and stars with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. What do you think is the effect of this repetition? What do you really? Yes, let's see. The poet has repeated the words to give a nice impact to his poem. Like the use of quiet and velvet pads describes that a tiger has to walk in a limited area of his cage. Of course, it could reach you, right? The listeners can feel what exactly the poet wants to say in limited words, in a very rhythmic way. He cannot run as he would have done had it been in the forest. Then whereas quiet rage shows that the hidden anger inside him which has grown stronger because of his confinement in the cage. The next word he used is brilliant. The word brilliant in the first line means the twinkling bright stars, and brilliant words used for the tiger's eyes shows the sadness of the tiger who could have led a free and fearless life of its own choice, of course, of it. Well, that's all about this poetry from my side, and hope you all understood the poetry quite well. I've repeated in various forms and ways for you to be able to answer it out in your board exams, because the questions could be formatted in any way, and you need to frame up your answers in the expected way. So that's the reason I put it in different forms for you. That's all from my end. Keep learning. My smart learners, complete your classworks. Also keep learning, keep reading the supplementary reader simultaneously. Smart learners, stay safe, be happy, and God bless you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.